My son and I had been estranged for 8 years. The last time we spoke, he had told me that I was a terrible father and that he never wanted to see me again. I was heartbroken, but I didn't want to give up on our relationship. So, I decided to reach out to him again, hoping that he had cooled off and was willing to talk. I sent him a message, and to my surprise, he agreed to meet with me. We decided to meet at a coffee shop in town, and I arrived early, nervous but hopeful. When he arrived, I could see the anger and resentment still burning in his eyes. I knew that this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. I tried to apologize and explain my side of the story, but he wasn't having it. He told me that I had ruined his life and that he would never forgive me. I was taken aback by his words, but I tried to remain calm. I explained that I had been saving money for him, $120,000, and that I wanted to help him get back on his feet. But instead of being grateful, he became even angrier. He told me that he didn't want my money and that he would never accept it. I was shocked and hurt by his reaction. I didn't understand why he was being so stubborn and ungrateful. But then, he dropped a bombshell. He told me that he had been in deep financial trouble and that he needed my help. But not in the way I expected. He told me that he wanted the deed to my house. He said that he would do whatever it took to get it, even if it meant hurting me. I was horrified by his demand. I couldn't believe that my own son would stoop so low. But I knew that I had to protect myself and my home. So, I decided to take drastic measures. I pulled out my phone and pressed record. I had been secretly recording our conversation, hoping to capture evidence of his true intentions. And what he said next would change everything. I'll never speak to you again unless you give me the deed to your house, He had no idea I was recording him. But I knew that I had to act fast. I couldn't let him get away with this. I decided to take a stand and fight back. But how? And what would be the consequences of my actions? I'll continue my story in the next part. Stay tuned. I decided to take a stand and fight back, but I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me, not yet. I needed to think clearly and come up with a plan. I looked my son straight in the eye and said, "I'm not going to give you the deed to my house. You can't just demand something like that and expect me to hand it over." My son's face turned red with anger, and he slammed his fist on the table. "You're just being stubborn, Dad," he said. "You're not thinking about what's best for me. You're only thinking about yourself." I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "I'm thinking about what's best for both of us," I said. "I'm thinking about the fact that you're trying to take advantage of me. You're trying to manipulate me into giving you something that's not rightfully yours." My son's expression changed from anger to shock. "How dare you," he said. "I'm your son. I deserve to have what's coming to me." I shook my head. "You don't deserve anything," I said. "You've made it clear that you don't care about me or my well-being. You only care about what you can get from me. Well, I've got news for you. I'm not going to give you anything else. I've given you enough already." My son's face turned white with rage, and he stood up, towering over me. "You're going to regret this, Dad," he said. "You're going to regret not giving me what I want." I stood up, too, and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not afraid of you," I said. "I'm not going to back down. I'm going to stand up for myself and for what's rightfully mine." My son's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer to me. "We'll see about that," he said. I could feel the tension in the air, and I knew that things were about to escalate. I was ready for it, though. I was ready to defend myself and my home. But just as things were about to get out of hand, my son's phone rang. He looked at the screen and then back at me. "I have to take this," he said. "But this isn't over, Dad. Not by a long shot. He turned and walked away, leaving me feeling relieved but also anxious. I knew that this wasn't the end of the confrontation. I knew that my son would be back, and next time, things might get ugly. I decided to take some precautions, just in case. I went home and changed the locks on my doors. I also installed a security system, complete with cameras and motion detectors. I wanted to be prepared for anything. As I was working on the security system, I couldn't help but think about my son's behavior. I couldn't understand why he was being so aggressive and demanding. I couldn't understand why he was trying to take advantage of me. But then, I remembered something. I remembered a conversation I had with my son's mother a few years ago. She had told me that my son was in deep financial trouble, that he had racked up a lot of debt and was struggling to pay it off. I realized that my son's behavior was not just about me or my house. It was about his own desperation. He was desperate for money, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get it. I felt a pang of sympathy for my son, but I also knew that I couldn't let him take advantage of me. I had to stand up for myself and for what was rightfully mine. As I finished up the security system, I couldn't help but wonder what my son would do next. Would he try to break into my house? Would he try to hurt me? I didn't know, but I was ready for him. I was ready to defend myself and my home. But as I was about to go to bed, I heard a strange noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone was trying to get into my house. My heart racing, I grabbed my phone and called the police. I told them that someone was trying to break into my house, and they promised to send someone over right away. As I waited for the police to arrive, I couldn't help but think about my son. Was he the one trying to break into my house? Was he the one who was desperate enough to resort to breaking and entering? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. As I waited for the police to arrive, I stood by the window, watching the darkness outside. I could feel my heart racing, and my mind was racing with thoughts of my son and what he might be capable of. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise, and I saw a figure darting across the lawn. I couldn't make out who it was, but I knew that it was someone who didn't want to be seen. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and ran outside, shining the light in the direction of the figure. But when I got to the spot where I saw the person, there was no one there. I was about to go back inside when I heard a rustling in the bushes. I turned around, and that's when I saw him. It was my son. He was hiding in the bushes, and he looked like he was trying to sneak away. I felt a surge of anger and fear, and I didn't know what to do. I stood there, frozen, as my son looked up at me with a mixture of guilt and defiance on his face. "What are you doing, son?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My son didn't say anything. He just looked at me with a cold, hard stare. I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I didn't want to confront him, not yet. I wanted to give him a chance to explain himself, to tell me what was going on. But as I looked at him, I saw something in his eyes that made me realize that he wasn't going to explain anything. He was going to deny everything, and he was going to try to turn the tables on me. I knew that I had to be careful. I knew that I had to be one step ahead of him. So, I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. I tried to think clearly, to come up with a plan. And then, I saw the police car pulling up to the house. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, and I knew that I wasn't alone. I knew that I had help. I walked over to the police car and explained the situation to the officer. He listened carefully, and then he got out of the car and approached my son. "Sir, can I talk to you for a minute?" the officer asked. My son nodded, and the officer started to question him. I watched as my son denied everything, as he tried to spin the situation to make it look like I was the one who was crazy. But the officer wasn't buying it. He could see the guilt written all over my son's face, and he knew that something was up. After a few minutes of questioning, the officer turned to me and said, "I think we have a situation here. I think your son is in some kind of trouble, and he's trying to get out of it by any means necessary." I nodded, and the officer continued. "I'm going to need to take him in for questioning. Can you come down to the station and fill out a statement?" I nodded again, and the officer handcuffed my son and read him his rights. As they drove away, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I knew that I was finally going to get some answers. I knew that I was finally going to find out what was going on with my son. But as I stood there, watching the police car drive away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. I couldn't shake the feeling that my son was going to try to escape, to try to wriggle his way out of this situation. And I knew that I had to be ready. I had to be prepared for anything. As I walked back into the house, I felt a sense of unease. I knew that I was in for a long night, a night of waiting and worrying. But I was determined to see this through, to see justice served. And as I sat down on the couch, waiting for the phone to ring, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. As I sat on the couch, waiting for the phone to ring, I couldn't help but think about the events that had just transpired. My son, the person I was supposed to trust and care for, had been trying to break into my house. He had been trying to steal from me, to take advantage of me. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and betrayal. How could my own son do this to me? I thought back to all the times I had helped him, all the times I had given him money and support. And this was how he repaid me. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I knew I had to stay focused, to stay calm. I had to think about what to do next. As I sat there, I heard a knock at the door. It was the police officer who had taken my son away. He had some news for me. "Mr. Johnson, we've been investigating your son's activities, and we found some disturbing things," he said. "It appears that he's been involved in some shady dealings, and he's been using your house as a front." I felt a surge of anger and fear. What had my son gotten himself into? What kind of dealings? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The officer hesitated before answering. "We're not entirely sure yet, but it looks like he's been involved in some kind of organized crime. We've found evidence of money laundering, extortion, and other crimes." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My son, involved in organized crime? It couldn't be true. But the officer's words kept echoing in my mind. I thought about all the times my son had been acting suspiciously, all the times he had been evasive and secretive. It all made sense now. He had been hiding something from me, and it was big. The officer continued to explain the situation, telling me that they would need my help to take down my son's associates. I nodded, still trying to process everything. I knew I had to do what was right, even if it meant turning against my own son. As the officer left, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I knew that I was in for a long and difficult road ahead. I would have to face my son's crimes, and I would have to face the consequences of his actions. But I was determined to see justice served, no matter what it took. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, trying to come to terms with what I had learned. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could do was think about my son and what he had done. As the hours ticked by, I knew I had to take action. I had to do something to stop my son's associates, to bring them to justice. I decided to go to the police station and offer my help. I would do whatever it took to bring down my son's empire, no matter how difficult it would be. As I walked into the police station, I felt a sense of determination. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, ready to fight for what was right. But as I approached the desk, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. My son was sitting in a cell, looking smug and confident. And next to him, sitting in the same cell, was someone else. Someone I knew. Someone I trusted. As I stood there, frozen in shock, I couldn't believe my eyes. Who was this person, sitting next to my son in the cell? It was someone I had known for years, someone I had trusted with my life. It was my best friend, John. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. How could John be involved with my son's crimes? I thought back to all the times John and I had spent together, all the times we had talked and laughed. He had been like a brother to me. And now, he was sitting in a cell with my son, accused of being involved in organized crime. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. The officer at the desk noticed my reaction and came over to me. "Mr. Johnson, I think you should sit down," he said, guiding me to a chair. I sat down, still trying to process what I was seeing. The officer continued to explain the situation, telling me that John had been working with my son, helping him to launder money and extort people. I felt like I was going to throw up. How could John do this to me? I thought about all the times John had come to my house, all the times he had eaten at my table. He had been like a member of the family. And now, he was accused of being a criminal. I couldn't believe it. As I sat there, trying to come to terms with what I was hearing, I saw John look up at me. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition, a glimmer of guilt. But then, his expression changed, and he looked away. I knew that I had to talk to him, to find out what was going on. I asked the officer if I could speak with John, and he nodded. He led me to a small room where John was waiting. As we sat down, John looked up at me, a mixture of emotions on his face. "I'm sorry, Mike," he said, his voice shaking. "I never meant for things to go this far." I felt a surge of anger, but I tried to keep my cool. "What's going on, John?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "How did you get involved with my son's crimes?" John took a deep breath before answering. "It started a few years ago," he said. "Your son came to me with a business proposition. He wanted me to help him launder money, to make it look like it was coming from legitimate sources. I didn't know what he was involved in, I swear. I thought it was just a normal business deal." I felt a wave of skepticism. Was John telling the truth, or was he just trying to cover his tracks? I didn't know what to believe. As I sat there, listening to John's story, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I didn't know what was going on, or who I could trust. All I knew was that I had to get to the bottom of things, to find out the truth. And I was determined to do just that. As I listened to John's story, I couldn't help but feel a sense of skepticism. Was he telling the truth, or was he just trying to cover his tracks? I didn't know what to believe. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something there that made me think he might be telling the truth. I saw a deep sadness, a sense of regret. It was as if he had been caught up in something he couldn't control, something that had spiraled out of control. I decided to press him for more information, to see if I could get to the bottom of things. "What do you mean, you didn't know what he was involved in?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. John hesitated before answering. "I mean, I thought it was just a normal business deal," he repeated. "I didn't know he was involved in organized crime. I swear, Mike, I would never have gotten involved if I had known." I studied his face, trying to read his expression. Was he telling the truth, or was he just trying to spin a story? I didn't know. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something there that made me think he might be telling the truth. I saw a deep fear, a sense of desperation. It was as if he was trapped, caught in a web of deceit and corruption. I decided to push him further, to see if I could get him to crack. "What about my son?" I asked, my voice firm. "What does he have to do with all of this?" John's eyes darted back and forth, as if he was searching for an escape route. He's the one who got me involved," he stammered. He's the one who promised me a cut of the profits. I felt a surge of anger, but I tried to keep my cool. What profits? I asked, my voice cold. John hesitated before answering. The profits from the money laundering scheme, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a wave of shock wash over me. Money laundering scheme? I had no idea my son was involved in something like that. But as I thought back to all the times he had been acting suspiciously, all the times he had been evasive and secretive, it all started to make sense. I realized that my son was in deeper than I had ever imagined. And I knew that I had to get to the bottom of things, to find out the truth. I decided to push John further, to see if I could get him to crack. Who else is involved? I asked, my voice firm. John's eyes darted back and forth, as if he was searching for an escape route. I don't know, he stammered. I swear, Mike, I don't know anything else. I studied his face, trying to read his expression. Was he telling the truth, or was he just trying to spin a story? I didn't know. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something there that made me think he might be telling the truth. I saw a deep fear, a sense of desperation. It was as if he was trapped, caught in a web of deceit and corruption. And I knew that I had to help him, to get him out of this mess before it was too late. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. My son was standing in the doorway, a smirk on his face. And behind him, standing in the shadows, was someone else. Someone I knew. Someone I trusted. As I turned to leave, I saw my son standing in the doorway, a smirk on his face. And behind him, standing in the shadows, was someone else. Someone I knew. Someone I trusted. It was my business partner, Alex. I felt a wave of shock and betrayal wash over me. How could Alex be involved in this? I thought back to all the times we had worked together, all the times we had trusted each other with our deepest secrets. And now, I realized that he had been playing me all along. My son and Alex exchanged a look, and I knew that I had to act fast. I turned to the officer and told him to arrest them both. As the officer handcuffed my son and Alex, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Justice was finally being served. But as I looked at my son, I saw something that made my heart ache. I saw a young man who had been consumed by his own greed and ambition. A young man who had thrown away his future and his relationships for the sake of money and power. I felt a pang of sadness and regret. I wished that I had been able to reach him, to stop him before it was too late. But as I looked at Alex, I felt a different emotion. I felt anger and betrayal. How could he have done this to me? How could he have used our trust and friendship to further his own interests? I turned to Alex and demanded to know why he had done it. He looked at me with a mixture of guilt and defiance, and told me that he had done it for the money. He had been in deep financial trouble, and he saw my son's scheme as a way to get out of it. I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. How could he have been so selfish and greedy? I turned to the officer and told him to take them away. As they were led out of the room, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. It was finally over. The nightmare was finally ending. But as I turned to leave, I saw John standing in the doorway. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and regret, and told me that he was sorry. Sorry for his part in the scheme, sorry for betraying my trust. I looked at him, and I saw a man who had been broken by his own mistakes. A man who had lost his way and his sense of purpose. I felt a pang of compassion and forgiveness. I told him that I forgave him, and that I wanted to help him get back on his feet. He looked at me with tears in his eyes, and thanked me. As we hugged, I felt a sense of healing and closure wash over me. It was finally over. The nightmare was finally ending. And as I walked out of the police station, I felt a sense of peace and resolution. I knew that I had done the right thing, and that justice had been served. I also knew that I had learned a valuable lesson. A lesson about the dangers of greed and ambition, and the importance of forgiveness and compassion. As I walked away from the police station, I felt a sense of hope and renewal. I knew that I would always carry the scars of this experience with me, but I also knew that I would always be stronger because of it. And as I looked up at the sky, I felt a sense of gratitude and wonder. I was grateful for the chance to start again, to rebuild my life and my relationships. And I was in awe of the power of forgiveness and redemption.